Jeff, I've got a very, very special guest tonight. It's a returning guest. He was actually one of the, we got the level 5 hype train done. Nice. Got that one in my ear. Thanks to everybody who contributed to the level 5 hype train. New emotes incoming.
Literally 10 minutes in.
I know. I love it. I love it.
That might be a record.
We have such a hype community. Oh, it's still going. The final level. We are on the final level. It's the final countdown.
You got to change it. If you're gonna sing, at least change the words to be exactly what you want them to be. Otherwise, just play the song.
I can't. I'll get DMCA'd.
That's probably true. They might make an exception if you keep singing their song. They might normally we wouldn't allow this, but stop singing, Neil.
Stop singing, Neil. Stop singing. We're gonna DMCA you just because of that.
I can accompany you on the guitar, but that's all I got for you.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm not singing.
Awesome. We have a returning guest tonight, Jeff. We have AJ Nash, who is the Senior Director of Cyber Intelligence Strategy at Anomali Threat Intelligence. AJ was one of the first guests that we had on the stream when we first started this up a year ago. So I'm super excited to have AJ back a year later. When we've gotten to the audience that we've gotten and get to introduce so many more people to AJ. I grilled him pretty hard last time. You know how I am about threat intelligence. I love to rail on the threat intelligence guys.
When you asked if I wanted to be on, I was like, absolutely, I do. I'm super excited. He's an awesome guy.
He is an awesome guy. So real quick about AJ, and then I'll let him introduce himself. He's previously worked for some very, very familiar companies such as Symantec, Capital One, SAIC. AJ is also a fellow U.S. Air Force veteran, and so AJ, thank you very much for your service. No introduction I could do would do it justice. So AJ, the floor is yours. Would you please go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. So as you said, I'm AJ Nash. I'm the Senior Director of Cyber Intel Strategy at Anomali. Background, I was Air Force about 9.5 years, give or take. Counterterrorism, counterinsurgency, counter-trafficking in persons, chased war criminals for a couple of years in there. Some pretty cool work. I was originally a linguist, but not a particularly good one, which is why I ended up doing intel analysis. I was a little better at that, as it turned out. I got out, I was medically retired and moved into the private sector, but actually before that I did defense contracting. So I did another 9 years and change in contracting. Continued to work in the government space, obviously, counter IED work and some other counter-terror work, and then fell into cyber sort of by mistake, as how often happens. I was on a contract working to develop a new concept for how we were going to look at and analyzing threats in cyberspace based on the concept of warfighting, which is intelligence preparation of the battle space. This was going to be a cyber version, cyber intelligence preparation of the battle space, which became cyber intelligence preparation of the environment because the Secretary of Defense didn't want to call it battle space. And nobody's really familiar with CIPE or remembers it, but everybody knows kill chain, and this was what became. So I was there when that was all being built originally. And that's how I grew into cyber. Left the government space for private sector now, about 5 years ago, I suppose. And primarily have been building intel programs, helping people build intel programs. I've been at Anomali now for a couple of years, and that's been a big chunk of my role. But I also work on the business side. I work to help some of our sales organizations, some of our customers succeed, and I oversee the intel program that we have inside Anomali now. So a little bit of everything. Like most people in cyber, I took an odd course to get where I am. And I'm excited to be here tonight, man. It's cool to be back. It's been a while. For anybody who knows me, the hair is probably a shock. I've been growing this since COVID started. So February 3rd of last year is the last time I had a haircut. And I'm just growing it out now so I can donate it to a charity. So pretty soon I'll be shaved bald, which means I'll match you guys a little bit better.
I was gonna say we could play like which of these things is not like the other with the hair, but I think Jeff and I are just like enamored. We just gotta like put you in the big screen just for a second. Just look at it. Wow,
it's pretty awesome.
It's gorgeous. Can I run my fingers through it?
I'm a Minnesota guy, so we talk about hockey a lot. This is some good hockey hair right here. So get some good lettuce going. Yeah, it's quite a salad.
I've not heard the lettuce analogy on that one.
yeah, it's just salad coming out the back of the helmet if I had this going. So all the guys I grew up with who played hockey, which I did not, this is how they had their hair.
Now it's interesting. You bring up you had an unusual road into cyber, and this is definitely not. I've got topics for us to talk about tonight. We can definitely get to that. When you look back at your journey into cyber and you look at where cyber is now, is it easier or harder, do you think, to get into cyber now versus how you stumbled into it?
Oh, that's a good question. Man, I'll be a fence sitter. I'm going to say it's both.
Yeah.
It's easier because well, first of all, there's an endless supply of open jobs. So, there's 3 million openings in cybersecurity right now. There's also a lot more opportunities in education, a lot more programs available, both, 4-year programs, but there's a lot of training programs. There's a lot of vocational programs coming out. There's transitioning from the military. There's a lot of programs there. So in that regard, I think it's easier. There's a lot of opportunity. It's just hard because there's a lot of hard work to be done. I still think a lot in the industry, people write job requirements that don't make a lot of sense. I need 15 years experience in a technology that's only been available for 10 years. You need to have a master's degree and 20 years experience, but we're only going to pay you 42,000 a year as an entry level job. And we want you to come into the office even though we have COVID. So there's all those challenges, but I mean, overall, I think, there's just so much opportunity in this space. I would tell anybody who even is remotely interested in technology or computers or security, you should be looking at this industry if you're young and coming up, if you're in college, if you're thinking about it. There's an endless supply of opportunities, and job security is huge right now. Every day there's something new in the news, and that's just the stuff people are reporting. So in that regard, it's just this is the place to be right now in the carear world.
So I'm gonna. Well, go ahead, Jeff. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you kind of jokingly were talking about the fact that, you got to come into the office and whatnot. But with remote work, I think we've kind of all proven that even cyber can be done remotely. Do you think that's going to change?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I don't want to steal too much. I'm actually working on an article for Security Week magazine right now, or for Security Week Online right now, which sort of touches on that topic, which is, how are things going to be different in the post-COVID world? So I don't want to steal too much from it, but I'll hint because you asked and I have a big mouth. I think things are going to change quite a bit, frankly. The reality is we've had a year and a half for all the organizations and all the old folks, and that's how I'm going to put it in this case, who said, we can't, distribute, we've got to keep people in house, et cetera. They were forced to do this. They have to accept that it's worked. Productivity is not down. People said productivity would drop. It hasn't. Security hasn't gotten any worse. I think overhead costs are down. Now we're seeing companies that are adapting and saying, maybe we don't need these giant office spaces. Maybe we don't need to spend all this money for space in New York and San Francisco and Chicago. So I think this is here to stay. Me personally, listen, news breaking story for you guys. I haven't told anybody yet. Tomorrow's my last day in the DC area. I'm picking up and moving. I sold my house and I'm moving to Minnesota. And part of that was my calculus coming off of watching COVID for the last year and a half. Now I've been remote for a couple of years, and Neil, you know this. You and I travel a lot anyway. Yeah. But I finally have reached the point where I thought the world there as well. So in a changing environment, I feel safer going pretty much wherever I want to, as long as you go someplace where you're still on the grid. I mean, 20 minutes from an airport, and we have high-speed, internet. I feel like people are going to be able to do more of that, and there's going to be more flexibility. So I think companies who try to force people to stay in the office are going to lose on talent. Again, we have a talent shortage. If companies say, we're steadfast in this, we need people in the office, I think they're going to have a hard time getting people. Especially if you want to look at it generationally, you look at Gen Y, Gen Z, they care a lot more about quality of life. They care a lot more about balance. They work to live to work, and they'll take less money to have the freedom to golf in the afternoon if they want to, or, take the morning off and come back in and work a little bit later, or shuffle their schedule, or, work with their dog under their desk all day. My dog actually is right over here sleeping right now. And she works under my desk most of the day. Well, I work and she sleeps. But I think sometimes it's the other way around. But I think that's all.
I'd love to read your dog's emails.
I was going to say, I'm just imagining AJ's dog writing a threat intel report for his boss while he sleeps.
Don't be surprised. I'm sure there's a few people who've read things I've done and thought, man, did the dog do this? I think we're seeing a change. I think maybe people haven't quite recognized it yet because COVID's still been ongoing and most organizations are still remote. But as we're starting to see people talk about bringing folks back in the office, I think we're going to see a change in how recruiting is done, in how how competitive the market is, how people choose to move. I think we may see a different kind of outsourcing too. That's the flip side, is companies saying, why do I have to pay somebody California numbers when I can pay them Memphis numbers? If they're just as good, now that I've accepted I can outsource this, why do I have to pay them to live in San Francisco? So we may see that too. We may see a change in the markets. We may actually see an exfiltration of people from these bigger cities because you can't afford to live there, and nobody's going to pay you the same money that you should. Like, there's going to be a whole lot of economic shifts, I think, that'll come out of this, which will be fun to watch. But in the near term, I think we're going to see companies who are not willing to at least go hybrid, at least say, listen, 2-3 days a week, stay home. I think they're going to lose talent really, really fast.
I want to pick on that a little bit because I want to play the counterpoint on that one. I want to Angry Amoeba comes through with the jokey question. We heard you go to Minnesota. I said, where at Minnesota are you headed, and are there any Anomaly job openings?
I'm going to the Twin Cities. We live just south of the airport, actually, Minneapolis, St. Paul. There's no job openings there. I'll be a lone man on the totem pole there. But that said, we're a diverse company. Right now, I work here, and my team is anywhere from Seattle to Belfast, Northern Ireland, and that won't change. So as far as openings, we have a pretty remote staff. If somebody's looking for a cool opportunity, I'm sure our website has some openings, or you can ping me on LinkedIn. And we could talk about it. But
I was going to say, don't say that. Don't say that. Everybody is running to LinkedIn right now to send you a message. Like AJ said, we can ping him on LinkedIn. Everybody is spamming your LinkedIn right now. Real quick,
I can take it.
On the counterpoint, though, on the working from home side, how do you offset like the Tim Cooks and the guy from Netflix, Hastings, who says, we will have people back in the office. We must have people back in the office. Like there are people whose cultures, or at least CEOs, who feel like their cultures are predicated on that in-person interaction.
Yeah, I think we'll find a mix. Again, I think those guys aren't. I'm not going to go out and say Tim Cook's wrong. I mean, that's part of my position. But I will say I think Tim Cook probably will adapt. I think we'll end up with hybrid. I don't think we're going to have companies where everybody's remote all the time. I do think that's hard on morale, and I do think there's some things that are much better handled in person. But I think what we're going to find is a lot of hybrid opportunities. I suspect if Apple has a fantastically talented person who says, listen, I'm in the office, I doubt they're going to fire that individual. They'll figure out a way around it. I think hybrid will be the norm. I think remote will be common for some people who are in certain roles where it works out fine. I think Zoom has proven to be effective with Slack and some of these other things. I do think we could see a capping on career, though, where there's a point at which if you're not in the office for a period of time and you're not developing those relationships, you don't have those interactions. Some things do have to be done in person. I think people will find a cap to their career, perhaps. But again, if we're talking about Gen Y, Gen Z, they don't care yet. First of all, they're too young. They're not worried about being in the E-suite, anyway, unless they're starting their own business. So it won't really impact them. I think everybody's going to find their own piece, right? But I'd be very surprised if Apple, Netflix, if any of the big companies, any successful company, frankly, doesn't have a big shift from what it was pre-COVID. Companies who did nothing remote will now be going to, maybe 1 or 2 days a week. Companies who had some remote will say, yeah, if you want to be 5, be 5. I think we're going to see a shift, and that'll include those guys, I think. But they get a chance to kind of play with it, and we'll see what their success story is. And they also have some leverage. Let's be honest. They are a couple of the biggest companies and most desirable companies in the world. If you asked me, hey man, do you want this job at Apple, but you got to be in the office 5 days a week, or do you want this pretty decent job at a different place? You're going to make a lot less money. It's not quite as cool, and it won't be a career builder. Depending on where I am in my career and how old I am, I might go in the office 5 days a week for that gig. But even then, I might just be using it to put it on the resume. I'll do it for a couple of years and then build some more leverage, and now I can go work wherever the hell I want, wherever the heck I want. I don't even want to keep it clean here. Go work where I want and take that resume builder with me. So, I think we're all in a different world, and we'll see. But, I heard today about, I just want to get back to, normal. I want to get back to how it was. That's gone. That's gone forever. 2019 is never coming back.
Let's redefine normal.
Normal is going to be new. That's right. It's going to be a new normal. You're never going back to what that was. And I think that'll be a good thing. I think we've seen a lot of success stories. And if you think about it, some of the research says productivity hasn't gone down. It stayed about the same or even a little better depending on where you look, which tells me a couple of things. First of all, it tells me people weren't doing 8 hours a day worth of work just because they're in the office 8 hours a day.
Let's call a spade a spade.
Right? Yeah, and we all know that, right? It's lunch breaks, it's water breaks, it's, let me take a walk, let me go smoke a cigarette, let me talk to my buddy at his desk,
Yeah.
myself included. Listen, I doubt I've done 8 hard hours straight many
Yeah.
days in my life. And then there's a handful you do, something really hot's happening, and 10 hours disappear and you forget about it, but you were busy the whole time.
Yeah.
So most of that just didn't happen anyway. But the other thing it tells me is that this is viable. We can work this way and be successful. And people stayed productive during COVID. This is a time when your kids were also home from school and you didn't have daycare and all the stuff that you didn't plan for that people still worked around. Now imagine getting to 2021, the end of this year into 2022, assuming we get past, Delta variant, et cetera, get close to whatever normal is going to look like. Now those people can work from home and they don't even have those distractions. So either they're going to have more productivity, or they're going to stay as productive because they just won't work nearly as hard, and they'll have a better work-life balance, but the overall productivity of the company will still be solid. So I feel like there's a lot of benefits for companies. And again, the cost savings, you've seen travel costs are down, overhead costs are down. I think companies will find a way to make this make sense for them too.
On the flip side of that, and I'm glad Isaias came through with kind of the other challenging side of that, and I've said this before, like I'm a believer of kind of this mentality here. Isn't remote work bad for people who are looking for mentorship opportunities and trying to learn in the industry? And let me clarify that point. If you've got a completely brand new person, entry level, Intel analyst who needs some over-the-shoulder pilot, co-pilot, if we use the military analogy type of behavior, isn't remote work bad for them?
It's harder. I don't know that I'd say it's bad necessarily. It's harder. I think what we have to do is adapt. So I think, ideally, yeah, I'd love to be side by side with somebody like that and be able to mentor them and look over their shoulder and work with them and give them what they need, but give them the space when they need it, et cetera. But let's make the assumption I couldn't, because the person we hired is geographically just too far away from me. We're not going to make that work. I think there's enough technology to make that work, and frankly, I think that'll continue to improve. So right now we've got Zoom, right, and we've got WebEx and a couple of these things. We're going to see those technologies also improve. We've seen the beginnings. And I started looking at this last year. I wondered how long COVID would go and if conferences would go away. And we looked at the possibility of virtual reality, basically, and some of the technologies with that. I think some of those technologies have a chance to really fill some of that gap where you can really close the feeling of togetherness. You can create more of that without being together necessarily. So I think we're a few years away from that. I think that's an unusual way to look. Mentorship is harder. When you're young and getting started, it is harder. Certainly if you're remote, it's harder to manage people that are young and new as well. It's hard when you interview now. You really have to trust who you're interviewing and hiring because they're going to be away from you. But I think there's ways to close that gap. Me personally, I happen to have a team that's a little more senior, so I don't have as big an issue with this, but I'm also a huge believer in a lot of communication. I have one-on-ones with everybody on the team every week. We have a team meeting. We have one a week. We do a happy hour, which we've been able to do virtual happy hours, which have been very successful. We do that once a month. So there's a lot of opportunities to create that bond and that communication. But it's still hard to work through, certainly. That's something that I think we'll have to work to improve and to stay with a lot of this remote work. But again, I believe hybrid will still be the main model. So for that, you can have 1 or 2 days a week in the office and match it up with your new young hire and give them a couple days of mentorship and then let them run and do the thing that they got to do for the next 3 days as well. So there's a way to balance that, I think.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I do want to get to our news for tonight. I know that we'll have way more questions regarding career and things like that. And as you can see, everybody who's watching, we are huge on asking questions. And so do make sure you get those questions dropped into to chat. We'll get those pushed to AJ as we move through it. AJ, let's roll over and let's talk about some news really fast, right? And I know that there's been obviously a massive amount of buzz here lately about Kasaya, and there's obviously been, we've got this on the piggyback on the heels of several other huge ransomware attacks. And I can remember last year during COVID, kind of at one point in time reporting the news and going, dear God, is that what I'm going to report every week is a brand new ransomware attack every week? And it's interesting to see how it's just escalated over the last year of doing that. Can you talk really quickly about some of the research that your team is doing internally to try and get ahead of predicting these types of attacks from a threat intel perspective?
Yeah, I can a little bit. So I'll start with the bad news, which is it's hard. I've been now in the private sector, like I said, for about 5 years, and I still on day one, very early on, And now my story is still the same. And then I tell people that the two things I really care about are business email compromise and ransomware. And so we have seen this has been progressing for a while. We've known these are the two big threats. There's a lot of other things out there, of course, but these are the big threats, right? And ransomware continues to get more sophisticated, but it just continues to grow because it works. Ultimately, these organizations, people pay the ransom, which is a terrible idea. If you're paying the ransom, you're feeding the enemy. I understand people want to make arguments about it.
Yeah.
The business will go out of business otherwise. And I'll be very blunt. I said this to somebody the other day. If your problem is if you don't pay the ransom, you go out of business, you deserve to go out of business. I realize it's not going to stop it from paying the ransom, but that's the problem.
So I take it you're on the no pay bandwagon is what I get from you.
I am. The only exception I ever think is reasonable is life and death. Ransomware in healthcare organizations that are shutting down machines that are keeping people alive in the ICU, I get you're going to pay that ransom. I also think you need to fix your problems so you don't have this happen again. But I get it. You're not going to let patients die, and neither would I. But frankly, if you're going to lose millions of dollars, I don't have a lot of sympathy for you. You've had opportunities to prepare for this and deal with it. And I think our biggest issue is that companies refuse to invest in preventative measures. They invest just enough to check a box because we're still more focused on quarterly profits. Mm-hmm. And the benefit of quarterly profits outweighs the risk and the damage of compromises. These things happen so often, and there's very little repercussion, for leadership. So not much really changes. And we've been seeing that over and over and over again. And that's part of the reason this continues to get worse is companies aren't doing the things that we've all been saying they should be doing for 3, 4, 5 years. And so instead they just pay the ransom when it's bad enough, and it just feeds the adversaries and they get worse. Everything gets a little bit worse. They get better at this. Their targeting gets better. The technology gets better. They get more aggressive. And now we're here, now they're hitting, oil pipelines and meat processing plants, which, frankly, the Kasaya one, at least it's technology they hit. Mm-hmm. But, we're starting to see them hit what I would call, critical infrastructure really at this point. Colonial Pipeline was probably a mistake. I think I've several people have said, and I happen to agree with them, that seems like that might have been an error, and the way they responded to it shows I think they were afraid of what the repercussions would be of having hit Colonial Pipeline. The issue with ransomware is it isn't always targeted. Sometimes it's just out there, right? And if the wrong person clicks on the wrong thing and gets hit, and I suspect Colonial Pipeline may well have been that kind of a situation. But what we're seeing here with, Revel and the meat processing plant now Kasaya, those are probably more targeted if I had to guess. So to get back to your question about what's the team doing about it, right? I won't sugarcoat it. We didn't know this was coming. We didn't have advance warning. This was something we didn't see chatter about. I don't know anybody that did. I don't think anybody knew in advance. We know about Revel and we know what they're capable of, right? But this was a zero-day exploit against a supplier essentially, right? So I think we have been doing more research on that concept, right? That adversaries are moving more into supply. Any sort of a supply chain, in this case, technical, MSPs, things like that. But we're looking at supply chain attacks. We're looking at anything from, not long ago, there was a compromise of Microsoft, right? That was also through a third-party, software download capability, right? Which is through GitHub and things like that. So we've done a lot to sort of focus in that area and take a look and say, this is becoming a pattern. Adversaries have figured out if I hit a supply, everything downstream gets compromised and I pick up all the benefits. So, whatever is higher up the stream is what I want to hit and let that take care of itself for me. I think they're going to run into some collateral damage when they do that. Again, they're going to hit some organizations they don't intend to hit, and they're going to see some blowback from that. I think this is going to result almost certainly in another discussion between Biden and Putin. There's already been some discussions about it. Of course, the Russians are going to deny any involvement in this directly, and the government may or may not be involved, but tacitly they will be one way or the other. And we're going to see more of that. So they're going to reach a point, though, the adversaries, where they go too far. I don't know where that point's going to be. This may be it. I would have thought the pipeline was getting pretty close, but they're going to reach a point where they just go too far. And the rule of thumb with Russia has been do whatever you want as long as it doesn't blow back on us. Don't attack inside the country. Don't bring too much pain to us. And we're seeing, so interestingly, this with Revel or R Evil, depending on how you pronounce it, with these guys, something I saw a couple weeks ago, and it showed up again in this attack, is that they're setting these things up to avoid organizations that primary languages on their computer systems are Russian, Ukrainian, et cetera, right? I actually downloaded those languages to my system a few weeks ago. We had seen some reporting on that as a possible measure that this particular group is using to avoid potential collateral damage that could harm them. So I've got all those languages downloaded on my system. I've seen different reporting as to whether they're only avoiding computers that have this as the primary language or just ones that have it loaded as one of their languages altogether. So
Yeah.
I still have English as my primary. I haven't decided to pick up, really strong Russian or Ukrainian, but I do have them on my system.
If you start typing your emails in Ukrainian, that'll be really impressive.
Right. I was a Serbian Croatian linguist, so I can't even do that anymore. I certainly can't do Russian. But I threw the languages on. It was enough of a kernel of information to me. I looked at it and said, okay, listen, it doesn't hurt anything to add those languages to my system and have them there. If something happens to hit my system and it's skipping by implementation on systems that have these languages, it's one of the first things I told some folks to do. I said, I would download these languages and add them to your system. It's not going to hurt anything. Maybe it's an extra countermeasure if something bad happens. But we're just following this pattern, right, of attacking what I would call supply chain, any different version of supply chain, and seeing where that takes things, right? And that's where we're seeing with something like this. So we're following it now. We certainly have a lot of customers asking a lot of questions. From a technology standpoint, the way we're designed, we're a threat intel platform, and we have another platform, the Anomali Match platform, that the idea is to tie external knowledge and intelligence to whatever's going on inside your environment. So we have a lot of intelligence built into the platform that had customers been hit by this and been already fully operational, they would have seen the IOCs and acted on it and probably mitigated most of the harm. But I won't say they would have stopped the initial attack. We wouldn't have. We didn't know this was coming. We would have seen the similar signs in some of the other IOCs and be able to slow it down though.
Yeah. So Isaiah says, are most of these exploits memory leaks? I'm going to say like it varies pretty significantly from ransomware attack to ransomware attack, but I think in this case, this one was a memory leak, if I do recall correctly, on this one.
Yeah, from what I've read.
Yeah. You mentioned something interesting where you talk about like you didn't see this coming. What is the vibe like in a company like Anomali, if you can talk about it from an intelligence perspective, when you don't see it coming? Do you usually see it coming and then you didn't see this one, and then is there kind of like that somber moment internally where you're like, shoot, where did we not have the right intel coming in to see this one?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'll give you a couple answers. Like, to be honest, from my side, it's not as much the second. I've been in those positions before. So we're not an intelligence provider as a company, right? We're a platform company. I do have an intelligence team and we do some intelligence work. Primarily, we're curating intelligence in the platform and improving some of the feeds, and we do provide some level of intelligence, bringing in different, writing different profiles and things like that. And we do a fair amount of our work is public, writing blogs, things like that. But we don't consider ourselves an intel provider. We don't actually sell intelligence. So we partner with companies whose primary job is to sell intelligence. The Flashpoints and CrowdStrikes and Intel 471s and the Symantec. I can go on and on, right? The whole list of partners that we have. So I don't want to leave them out. There's a whole lot of them. So I've been in those positions. When I worked at Symantec, for instance, this would have bothered me a bit more because in that job, my job was actually to write intel and to produce hopefully proactive intelligence. And I'd have been a little more hurt not to have known in advance. In our position now, we sort of feel that as it comes in, we do talk to our premiums and try to find out what they know. But to my knowledge, nobody knew in advance. This was a 0-day that caught everybody by surprise. I don't know of anybody who had any dark web chatter about this or anybody who knew the planning that was coming. Common with nation state work that you don't get a lot of advance warning on them. Nation state crime is kind of a borderline area there. But it's hard because we do have to do the reaction piece, right? Where it gets hard internally or where you start to feel for it is, okay, now we got to react. We got to figure out what we can find out as fast as we can. How do we inform customers? How do we help them? Because we have a lot of customers that are very concerned. But traditionally, most of those customers also have premium vendors that are tied into this. So they're really more interested in how did it work within your platform, or what would have been different had we had X, Y, and Z. There's a lot more opportunity for us to say, listen, if you'd had this vendor, you probably would have been more successful in your defense because they knew more about these features or they know more about this actor. And that's a lot of what we end up doing is having more discussions with customers about their intel requirements and about their collection plans and what we recommend they should have to get a more complete collection picture.
Another question came through. Looks like, what if the malware is pretending to be ransomware and you lose your data if you pay the ransom? I think this is always like the crux that at least the conversations that I have at the executive level is like, well, how do we know we're going to get our data back if we actually pay this ransom?
Yeah, you don't. You don't. Like I said, don't pay the ransom. This is just one of a number of reasons not to. I don't believe in paying the ransom because it feeds the bad guys. Obviously, it keeps you on the list. If you pay ransom, you show you're a payer. I promise you're going to get hit again.
Yeah.
But also, you don't know that you're going to get anything back. And there's a significant percentage of these ransomwares where people pay the ransom and don't get anything back. There's a significant percentage where the actor can't give you the data back if they want to. Some of them are using, malware and that isn't theirs to begin with, and they don't even have the decryptors. They don't care. They just want the money. So they damage you, and they don't care if you pay. Now, we have seen sort of a business model approach in the last year, I would say, where we've seen some really professionalized ransomware, that actually have customer service. They'll help you set up a Bitcoin wallet, and learn how to do crypto if you don't know how to, so you can pay them. Like, there's some very interesting customer service aspects to it. Some are better than the customer service I get from my own cable company. But
I'd love to hear the auto attendant tree on that one.
It's
for ransomware Bitcoin setup, press 2. Or...
Yeah, well, they don't outsource the work. At least they do it with their own people. But there's some really good customer service on that, and that makes sense from a business standpoint. If you're really in this, if you're big business ransomware, if you're organized crime, you want to give that service, for lack of a better way of putting it, because you want the reputation. But if you pay me, you'll get your data back.
Right.
A lot of folks that aren't like that. They're just, they're quick hit and runs, and you're going to pay them and you're never going to see the data. It's not going to matter. They were never going to give it to you either way. We've seen that. We've seen ransomware where it turns out that the adversary is incapable of giving you the data back. Ultimately, you shouldn't have to worry about it. And I know it's easy for me to say once somebody's been hit, but if we have proper data storage, proper backups, none of this should be more than an inconvenience. Now, I know it's going to be a significant inconvenience, but if we handled things better on the front end, the endpoint should have no value, really. If you ransom my laptop, I shouldn't care. There should be nothing on it I care about. I should just walk into my IT shop, swap out, and move on. And if we had enough people capable of doing that, that would greatly reduce the pain of ransomware. Now, that doesn't help us with things like manufacturing. I know that. There's a bigger picture there, and healthcare. Those are other pieces. And those are other pieces we need to work on with different technology and different countermeasures. But just the simple ones of the endpoints, there's still far too many companies, executives specifically, who are getting hit, and they just pay. They don't even want to tell the IT team. They just, I'll pay it, and I'll get restarted. Nobody has to know about it, and that just keeps feeding the machine. So, but yeah, if you don't pay the ransom, you don't have to worry about getting duped into paying ransom and not getting your data back. If you get ransom and you lose your data, it's gone.
The pay no pay conversation is interesting, and I share this story on stream pretty frequently. When I was at one of the companies I worked at before, I was working with Treasury, I was working with cyber insurance, and we were actively talking about a pay no pay scenario. And being the senior cybersecurity leader in the room, they said, "Well, what's your take on this, Neil?" And I said, "The answer is no pay, right? We don't pay. There's no sense to paying." And the vice president from Treasury literally stood up and said, "You better believe that if our PowerPoint presentation that the CEO is going to give to the Wall Street, to the street, on the day of the earnings call got ransomwared, we'd absolutely pay in a heartbeat." Like that mentality is what's prevalent at that executive leadership level.
Yep. And that's still the big problem. To me, that's the biggest problem in cybersecurity altogether is again, the value proposition here. As long as our business matters more and our quarterly profits matter more than security, not much is really going to change. And I still think that's where we stand today. There's far too many organizations do just enough to check the box. They worry about their quarterly profits. They're not going to invest in security that sometimes doesn't even have great return on investment or great metrics, right? The best security from standpoints like this is intelligence, which is really hard to measure value on. There are some ways to do it, and we're all getting better, I think, as an industry. But the only way to know something, the only way to prevent something is to know in advance or to have some reasonable conclusion you can put forward, some reasonable estimation of what you think is going to happen and how to prepare for that and how to make changes. That requires buying things that are really hard to get value on and measure. And if you're really successful, you may not be able to prove it because nothing happened. So how do I prove that I was successful and the intel worked because nothing happened to us? But if you don't do it, you get whacked. But organizations continue to do that because if I spent $3, $4, $5, $6 million and I can't prove where it went, it lowered my margins, it lowered my quarterlies. Now our profit margin is down, and that's a problem. And the fact of the matter is, executives get judged based on profit margin. They don't get judged based on whether they get compromised.
So actually,
really changing.
looks like a question came in while we were chatting about that. So we've seen SolarWinds hit now. Kasaya, which supply chain, quote unquote, would you be afraid of next?
Sure. I mean, the number one to me is Microsoft. And we saw the Microsoft hit, right? So it didn't have this kind of effect yet. But to me, Microsoft, almost everybody has Microsoft in their environment someplace. I mean, there are some organizations that are very Google focused, but most everybody still has Microsoft. And what we saw was a third party attack that was actually a legitimate Microsoft update that was downloaded and had malware in it, right? I worry about that. I worry about Microsoft and Google, and Splunk is pretty big. So to me, it just comes down to who's got the biggest footprint, right? So whatever organizations have the most customers are the ones I'm going to worry about. But to be honest, any organization that you trust enough that you have automatic updates into your system scares me right now. And that's a lot of them, right? That's how it's designed. Nobody is reading the code and going through and double checking the code before they do their next Microsoft update. Patch Tuesdays every Tuesday. Nobody checks those things. It's just understood that Microsoft's trusted and everything comes through. And I don't mean to pick on them. It's not their fault, right? Google's the same. There's all these other ones, right? So to me, any of those are big. If you've got an MSP, Kasaya is showing, right? MSPs are now something I'd be a little more concerned about. There's several really large ones.
And the MSP thing though isn't new, because we saw Cognizant, right? I think it was Cognizant get hit 4 years ago. And I think that was the first time that we saw like a serious MSP. Not that Kasaya is not serious, but Cognizant was pretty huge. Get popped as well.
Yeah, Wipro was a good compromise in that same vein as well.
Yes.
And that was Wipro was a little over 2 years ago now. So these aren't new things, right? And we're just going to see more of it. That's just the honest answer. Nobody wants to hear that, of course, and it's very doom and gloom, but it's just a reality. Because we're going to keep seeing more of these things. Oh man, whoever's asking questions with Mr. Nash, you got to knock that off, guys. That's my dad. But we'll get to that in a minute. But I'm no Mr. anybody. But yeah, it's I know it's a cop-out answer to go, Microsoft. But I mean, the truth is, it's the big companies that I worry the most about. That they can do the most damage. And I'm sure Microsoft, thankfully, is really good at this. They're good at security. They're good at intelligence. They were really.
I think you just lost Jeff.
And they were good at self-reporting.
I think you just lost Jeff. You just said Microsoft is good at security.
That's
overall,
all right.
They're pretty good.
Actually, I know what you mean.
Overall, they're
I know what you mean.
Nobody's perfect, but overall, they're pretty good. And they were also really good at their transparency, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
And I think that's another big part. Companies are going to tell us things, when they happen, and are going to actually be forward about it. SolarWinds was a terrible example in that they eventually were good, but when it first happens, the whole some intern is responsible is the worst possible answer to a question ever. And I don't.
So you're giving keys to the kingdom to an intern. Awesome.
Well, I just unloaded on that on LinkedIn too, because I was incensed by it. Let me get this straight. Like, you're the CEO. Supposedly we pay these guys exorbitant amounts of money to own risk, and then when something bad happens, it's somehow that risk all trickles down to somebody unnamed guy at the bottom or gal at the bottom. No intern did this. Like, everything they do has to go through somebody. There's a manager, there's a senior manager, there's a director, there's a senior director, there's VPs, there's a CISO, there's an E-staff, there's a whole bunch of people making a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
Somebody else owns responsibility. And I was furious. I don't normally throw a lot of really, heated stuff on LinkedIn. I try to keep it pretty professional, but I was pissed. And it was good to see eventually the company come back and go, yeah, that was a bad statement. We shouldn't have said that. It was all the worse that it was the outgoing CEO who had just made a ton of money and left.
Yeah.
And then they brought him back and paid him like $500,000 for a few months of troubleshooting to fix the problem that he left after causing, apparently. And then his first answer to people was, yeah, it's some intern did this. It was hard to watch, right? But that's another example of what we talk about with accountability. Until there's accountability at the top, I don't expect organizations really to invest properly to change a lot of these problems that are fixable.
But do you think it's not to push back, but do you think it's realistic for a CEO to ever say, the buck stops here? It's really been the last 3 years of my negligence of not caring about cyber and really only looking for profit margins as opposed to protecting my company and my customers' data. So it's really my fault. They're never going to say that.
I think Well, I think you're right. I think that's sad. That's the reality, right? The buck stops here is a good example, right? So I certainly don't want to go down the political track with this, but we once had a president who said that and believed it. That's leadership. Listen, ultimately, somebody's responsible. It's supposed to be the person at the top. So yeah, I'd love if the CEO just once stood up and said, you know what? You pay me a ton of money. It's my job to lead this organization. I own the fail. I'm going to fall on my own sword. This is on me. It's not like it would hurt that person. They're set. Right? They're a CEO of a major company. They could walk away and go golf for the rest of their lives and learn how to use sunscreen better than me all the time. So
most people already know.
So
AJ, you may have lost me a little bit on the Microsoft security thing, but you went way up in my book here.
So to answer the question, yeah, I genuinely expect that. If you think you're worth $5, $6, $7, $8 million a year at the top, then take responsibility. Otherwise, don't take the job. I genuinely believe that. I think CISOs, we've seen this get better, thankfully. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even bad thing happened. A couple people in the IT department got fired, and everybody moved on. And we've seen it move up the ladder. We've seen CISOs start to lose gigs over security issues, right? We've seen sometimes they're scapegoated. But most times they should be held accountable, right? We're starting to see that. I saw, it was a few years ago now, we don't see much this year. There was a business email compromise in Germany. It was about, I want to say it was $80 million. It was an aerospace company. And the CEO lost his job over it. Mm-hmm. To me, that's when things start to change, is when the E-staff thinks that they're actually going to be held accountable and they are at risk. It's funny how those budgets will change, and they'll start finding ways to justify spending the right amount of money. I'd like to see somebody have the guts to get hit and stand up and go, you know what? It's me. I own this. And if you let me stay, I'm going to fix it and do what needs to be done. If you don't, I get it.
That C-suite getting fired thing is just a bunch of FUD still right now.
Yeah.
If you even bring that up, they're going, whatever. It's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. So I'm so cynical on this topic. I'm so cynical on this topic because look, here's the thing. Like the problem is rooted at the board. Right? The problem is rooted at the board. The board says, I hired you CEO to increase my shareholder value. And at no point in time does a CEO say, good cybersecurity increases shareholder value. And I've talked about this on stream. I think the most eye-opening realization of that moment for me, I was sitting in an extended leadership with the CIO at one of the companies I was working with. And it's the CIO who said this. He said our budget is, I think it was like $7 or $8 billion was the IT budget, for that organization. This is obviously a $60 billion company. He said every $10 million that our budget goes up or down is a change of like 50 cents or 25 cents or something like that of the stock price. And he was like, I want you all to think about that the next time you ask for an increase to budget or you ask for an increase of money. And that permutation of that shareholder value is drifted down from the board all the way through that executive leadership chain that says my budget determines shareholder value, which then determines my stock plan, determines my bonus plan, determines my overall pay. And so I think that there's I hate to call it a toxic system of compensation at the executive level that is driven solely by that monetary experience, and it's across the entire executive tree, that at no point in time does somebody say an increase to the cybersecurity budget is actually an increase to the shareholder value.
Yep.
No, so what's it going to take to get that? What's it going to take to get that perspective? Because I mean, you're spot on that perspective, Neil. The problem is that the board doesn't see beyond the number, right? There's a perception if you get popped that you don't. And maybe I'm overthinking this, but as a customer of a healthcare institution that gets popped, I'm probably going to search for a different healthcare institution that doesn't take my information so cavalierly.
Well, but somebody commented on one of my YouTube videos that was talking about, well, why don't we just boycott, that company, or why don't we just boycott, this thing whenever they get popped from a cybersecurity perspective? That's what it was. They were
that would get the board's attention, I'm sure.
Well, but here's the thing. Somebody's like, Neil, why are you making a LinkedIn hacking video that encourages people to go to LinkedIn to promote their professional profile when LinkedIn was literally the biggest victim of two of the largest security breaches known to man. And it's just like, nope, show me where else you're going to network with professionals, right? Like, there are billions of professionals in an industry that you're trying to get into. How else are you going to talk to them? There are such huge monopolies in some of these places where nobody's going to boycott. Listen, let's be real. Nobody, Target literally saw one Q4 dip after their breach, and now they've got record profits and record stock prices. It doesn't affect companies. It does. That reputation, I think I bought into the reputation game. And when I first started my cybersecurity career, I now think it's a bunch of hogwash. Reputation ruining, that's not a real thing in cybersecurity.
Well, it hasn't.
People don't
I'm trying to think there's a critical mass.
People don't move. Generally speaking, inertia is part of the equation. It takes something, right? There are people that will make changes, but it takes something really egregious, right? Or something that really offends them. And it generally isn't the breach. Politics get people to move more often than breaches do these days, I think. So I don't think people pay much attention to it. Listen, people don't pick up and change banks over it. They just don't. And I think that's a big part of the problem is, when you ask, how do we fix this? If the board only cares about profit and the board doesn't think this hurts them, then it's over. The way it would change is if the population cared more about our data being compromised and actually created pain for the boards, but we don't. And unfortunately, that's a snowball that continues to grow. I don't know anybody who hasn't been compromised at this point. My data is everywhere all the time. I've sort of given up, if I'm going to be honest about it. So, I just switched credit cards again. Same company. I've had my credit card compromised 3-4 times. They just send me a new one. I don't even think about it anymore. They cover the costs. I had to identify it. We had, a slew of purchases for women's shoes and fashions in Britain. That wasn't me. And it was all really fast, and we picked it up. But they eat the costs, and banks eat billions of dollars in fraud. They just it's just built into their budget. They just don't even think about it anymore. So that's the problem, right? We've got to find another way. I hate to say this, and I know this is not what anybody wants to hear, and I don't know if it's the answer, but it may take some sort of government regulation.
He said
industries, it. I know. Nobody wants that. I don't either. And it may just be some industries that go there. If you're tied to the government, if you're infrastructure. I've said for years, defense contracting is a good example. Listen, if you're a defense contractor and you get popped, you lose your contracts, in my opinion. We should have clauses in these contracts. If you're developing the next fighter jet and you get compromised, that's it. It's wiped out. You lose billions. You lose the contract. We can certainly make some changes inside out, at least starting with classified environments, starting with government contracting, starting in places where we can show real impact and real, consequences that can be enforced, because that market's controllable. And then maybe it's its way out, but it's hard. It's hard to do it. I'd like to see more technically sound people on boards, people who understand intelligence, people who understand these technologies, who can at least impress upon the point of, listen, I'm not saying if you get compromised, you're going to lose business. I'm not going to tell you that because I think there's no data to support that. But I can tell you, if we build a better system, we can probably use that as a way to gain business. This can be marketed. We can tell people that we're better at this than others. You got to be careful if you go too far.
I was going to say, make a target out of yourself.
Yeah. Don't tell people you're bulletproof. Don't say you're perfect.
No pun intended.
You can tell them that you're better, and use that to sort of drive things forward. Just make sure you're investing and you're actually better.
So Mac Attack Hacker, I think, comes back to what you were talking about before when it comes to protecting against ransomware with the Mr. Nash thing. So are you saying that there should be a cloud storage system of sorts, and laptops should be just a way to access them? That way they could be easily swapped out.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of like a Chromebook model, right?
Yeah.
I think that's certainly doable. I think that's one way to do it. Let's put it that way. So you certainly could go to that model and have everything cloud. I know companies who put most of their things to, Google Storage or Microsoft OneDrive or whatever. A lot of companies are doing that already. So you're sort of creating that model as it is, and they say don't keep much on your endpoint. Yeah. People are still going to do that. People still have working documents on their endpoints, of course. But I think it's best if you can back things up to a shared place. If you're in a company that trusts you with an external hard drive, which probably shouldn't, backing things up there is always nice, especially if you're a small company. I use that as enterprise. Nobody should really be able to have access to external hard drives and thumb drives in enterprise. I mean, it's an insider threat nightmare. But let's assume you're a small company and you're worried about these things. Yeah, I think everything should be backed up, right? I personally, for what it's worth, I have 2 external hard drives, a terabyte each, that have everything backed up and duplicated. So when I travel, I bring one with me. The other one stays at home. Yeah. It's all encrypted. If you got a hold of all my data, everything I need. And that doesn't even include all the things that we keep on shared drives that are already separated out and clouded. So I'm not inviting anybody to get me, please. Like, don't attack me. It's just such an inconvenience. I really don't need to go through it. Yeah. But I can say if somebody wipes, if somebody hammers my end, I catch a ransomware, I'm just going to talk to IT. And I actually have 3 laptops sitting here. So it's not even going to cost me work. It's just going to be a pain in the ass. And there's ways to do that. Again, enterprise-wide, that gets harder. Me saying that's great. I'm one guy in a small company. I'm not suggesting that's easy, but we've got to make the endpoint really valueless or nearly valueless as a good place to start. Too many people put too many things on their endpoint that are incredibly important. Executives are the worst at this. They work on the most important thing that matters them the most. They save it to their desktop, and they're the only person with a copy. And like you said, it's the quarterly thing. They've been working on this thing for weeks, and it's this really high value thing, and they have the only copy of it because they don't trust anybody to see their work, and it's on their desktop. And then the same dope that's going to hit the email and answer, and click the link that's going to get them ransomed, because they don't pay any attention to the security briefings or the intel briefings because they don't have time for that stuff. Yeah, and that's something
they're above the training.
Oh, that's right. Absolutely.
And they have the authority to pay anything they want, so they just, I got hit. I'm going to make a quick call and we're going to get this paid off and done with because, I have the authority to do that as well. But, I'm not saying that happens a lot. I don't think there's a ton of CEOs out there doing that, but more than 2. There's been a few, I'm sure.
Enough to make it a joke. There's enough to make it a joke, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. We've all heard the stories, right? They're out there.
I mean, I was gonna say, I'm sure we've all got them. I mean, it is a real thing. I want to go back to one thing you said before, and then I know that I'm getting moderators telling me we got a ton of questions queued up in, and we're gonna probably pelt you with some questions. You talked about some of the ways that ransomware gangs have started to really become more sophisticated and become more business-like, and I know that's something that we've harped on quite frequently, Jeff. You and I, when we've talked on stream, not just with the customer service stuff, but with the affiliate programs. Ransomware service isn't new, but it's definitely evolving. When you look at your business from a threat intelligence perspective, with ransomware as a service being more and more prevalent, how is the threat landscape changing and refocusing at its efforts where maybe it's getting harder to track an R-Evil or, a dark side or somebody like that? Is that changing how you have to go about gathering some of that intelligence?
That's a good question. To be honest, I'd say no. I don't think it's changed much from what I've seen. I think more organizations certainly focus more on this, right? You focus on whatever's active and dangerous and scary. But to be honest, ransomware has been for a while. Mm-hmm. We're certainly seeing an uptick in their professionalism, which gets your attention and gets you more interested in it. But we're also not seeing a major change in a lot of the TTPs. What actors are using to be successful isn't changing all that much. So ultimately, it just comes down to letting people know and continuing to tell them this is a problem, this is something you need to worry about and be prepared for, and getting people to listen. So I haven't seen a great change in how threat researchers go about the work. The work is still pretty much the same. It's tracking down the targets, and a lot of this, sadly in this case, things like this, when it's a 0 day, it's post impact. You got to go back and take a look at how is this accomplished, tear it apart, learn from it, document it, look at it going forward, and just make the assumption, the pretty solid one, that this is going to happen again. Adversaries also reuse techniques. 0 days are burned, but they're not. I mean, they go into the wild and they get used.
Well,
and so now the question is, who's going to use it next? Who's going to pick it up? And
exactly.
Right. It's not going to necessarily used by the same actor, but now it's out there, right? So who's going to grab it and run with it? This is the danger. I mean, if you want to go way back even to when the agency was compromised, right, and they lost a bunch of tools. Yeah. The danger in things like that is it's not. Somebody made a joke back then of this is like if we lost ICBMs. Well, it's not, because the one thing about losing missiles is once it's fired, it's gone. You can't reuse the same missile. But when you lose cyber tools, they're out there forever, and everybody can use them. They get locked and they use over and over again. It's like losing a gun with all the bullets that regenerate. Like the gun's going to be available forever with constant fire.
An infinite number
it's
of bullets.
Video game lost. It's a video game loss at that
That's
point.
a lovely word picture to think about, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So, but as far as the research itself, I don't think that's changed much. The truth is, Intel folks have been saying for years, business email compromise, ransomware. These are things you need to worry about. These are the things a lot of folks are already focused on. And these aren't new groups. We keep telling people that. The sad part is when you go back and look and say, okay, well, let's look at this and see how it does. And you go, oh, well, this is exactly what they did last time. You hope something has changed. You can go back and go, okay, well, they got a new technique, new tool.
Yeah.
Nope, same tool, same vector. Just some dope clicked on something they shouldn't have. It's all the same still. And then you have to report that out, and that actually is really disappointing.
I'm kind of curious. Does if it ain't broke, don't fix it? Does that translate to Russian really well?
I'm sure. I don't know it specifically, but I have no doubt that's a universal concept, right? People use things that work. Adversaries are, they're like water. They're like path of least resistance.
Yeah.
And they're recyclers. That's the most green industry in the world, I think, is cyber adversaries. They will use anything that works. They will recycle it. They're not picky. They're not brand specific. They're not loyal to anything. If it works and they get access to it, they're going to use it.
100%. Yeah. So Lansing Kevin comes through, and I want to remind everybody that we try to stay as clear of politics, and we try to maintain a neutral ground. We may talk about political things, but only in the guise of cybersecurity topics. So I'll throw this one over to you, AJ. In your most politically neutral and centric mentality, from a conspiracy theory perspective, could these attacks just be our government running these attacks and using the news as a social engineering tool to see how we react as a country?
So, sure. Anything's possible. Likely, no. In fact, it's pretty far-fetched, I would say. I think the odds of this are less than 1%. I can never say zero. I'm an Intel guy.
Plus, that would have forced Republicans and Democrats to have exactly the same strategy over the last year. What are the chances of that?
Yeah, zero. No, I'm an Intel guy. I'd never say certain, but I would say I have very high confidence that this is very unlikely to be what's happening. There's a lot of places for conspiracy theories to fit.
This is not one of them.
This isn't one of them. No, this sadly is what it is. You also would have to be fooling pretty much the entire industry. I mean, there's a whole bunch of industry experts, private sector, who are involved in this and then follow up. If there's any belief that some of the entire private sector is either too stupid to figure these things out or completely compromised, you've now really wandered down quite a rabbit hole of conspiracy that I can't follow you.
Well, and here's what I oftentimes tell people, and I don't want to go too far down this conspiracy theory trail because Lord knows we could do it, but
we will get lost.
We will get lost. Having spent so long in the government, when you realize that they have a hard enough time tying their shoes, let alone putting together a giant conspiracy theory, I could just tell you, like they can't find their butt from a hole in the ground sometimes.
Yeah, I knew that's where you were going to go. The government is a model of inefficiency. And to be clear, I spent a lot of time in the government. I have a lot of friends in the government. I still think there's a lot of great things that get done there.
Yeah.
So it is the model of inefficiency. And the theories around, these conspiracy theories are, if you know anything about government, you go, man, what are the odds? We can't get people to agree on anything. I can't get 5 people to agree on lunch if it's from 4 different agencies. Like, there's zero chance they get together on these things. These guys just don't. They're not capable of that kind of coordination.
Yeah.
In these sort of situations, it takes amazing situations to get really good cooperation, and even that's fleeting. 9/11 is a good example. And after that, we had a whole lot of changes, and that fell apart, and the agencies still fight with each other.
Yeah, exactly, 100%.
Territory and whatever. It's just. I understand why people have conspiracy theories about the government and why there's so much fear. It comes from anytime you don't have access to something and don't know about the thing.
Yeah.
But 99 out of 100 of them have just no weight to them at all. I can tell you, sadly, I know of one that people should know about that they don't know about. And I know that's the worst thing to say. There's a whole bunch of conspiracy theories listening.
Great job. Good job. You just everybody in Stream now is dying to know what it is that you've got to say right now.
I know. I was just telling somebody this the other day. I said, man, the funny thing is there's the one thing that everybody I know believes in completely, and it's completely wrong. And it is the conspiracy theory that people should know about and don't. There's only one that comes to mind, and it's harmless. It doesn't matter. It's not hurting anybody. But there's so many people jump into, the logic when you start following, you're like, wait a minute, you have to believe in these 7 prerequisites to even get to your theory. None of them make any sense. They conflict with one another, but you've somehow skipped all of those so you can believe in the thing you want to believe in, which is ridiculous on its face. I get why people are afraid of things that I've been a part of agencies for a long time. I've been at the fort for 2 decades almost. It's just people like you and me just doing work, man. There's people. The agency isn't spying on you at home. They're not setting up these massive conspiracies. There's not tons of false flags.
You are not that important.
No, it's the truth. No, people just aren't that important.
I tell people that all the time. It's like, look, the agency has a hard enough time keeping up with our adversaries, let alone your freaking emails.
They have prioritized these 10 bad people. You're not on that list. And if you are, you would know about it already.
And that's the truth of it, is they're so done. Like, the theory that the agencies are turned against the domestic also suggests that they just don't care about terrorists and foreign actors and all the things they're actually paid to expect. Like, our country would be getting attacked every other day. We'd have foreign terrorists killing us all the time in the streets if the government was so focused on our domestic population. It's just there's a lot of real work to be done. And again, it also would require the belief that somehow you've been able to recruit lots of bad actors, lots of evil Americans to spy on each other. And that's just not how this country is designed. Like, that's just not how it works. Nobody's getting up and going, I'm going to go into the agency.
All right. I knew this conspiracy theory one was going to take us down a rabbit hole. I'm going to pull us back. I'm pulling us back off of this one.
Before you go off of that
here we go.
No. This is not necessarily conspiracy theory, but it is a kind of a spawn question. Right?
That's what every conspiracy theory says when they start out.
AJ, take it wherever you'd like. No, Neil and I a couple of weeks ago were talking about, does it really matter the country of origin of an attack?
And attribution.
We're like, I don't think it really matters. What are your thoughts?
It's a good question. So to me, there's only 2 reasons that attribution matters. The first one is if you can do something about it, which is generally limited to nation states. I want to know if Russia did this, if China did this, if North Korea did this, because that affects what we're going to respond as a nation. Whether we're going to have political response,
Biden's policies with Putin, right? For sure.
Policy changes, whether we're going to attack back inside, throw a missile at somebody. The government should care, right? Yeah. It's really hard. Attribution is obviously very difficult, but the government should care. So, private sector, you can't do anything about it. That part doesn't matter much to you. The only reason it should matter in the private sector, though, is so you can prepare for the next thing. What you do want to know is who has hit me and how, because that improves my knowledge base. I now understand that these actors are likely to come after me or have, et cetera. So it affects how you take a look at what's coming next, how you look at your intel requirements going forward. For instance, if I was a bank, a U.S. bank, I'm obviously looking at a lot of cybercrime organizations. I'm probably also looking at North Korea, a country that's known to sponsor financial events, right? I'm certainly looking at ransomware, because I already was in business email compromise. But if tomorrow I was hit and it was very confidently assessed that this came from Brazil, I'm going to use somebody who is very unlikely.
Yeah.
That's going to really change my prioritization at this point. I now have to worry about a nation state I wasn't even thinking about. And I've now got to do a lot more research and understand them better, right? So in that regard, I think it matters. It also matters in trending going forward. If I might be expecting North Korea to hit me again, because I'm a bank and they do financial nation state sponsored financial actions. If it's North Korea and we believe it fits, I want to add that to my understanding of how these organizations operate and make changes going forward, and maybe notify partner organizations. I may be one bank that was hit, and I can now notify all the other banks, talk FSI, SAC, et cetera, and insulate the rest of our community so it doesn't happen again, and be able to track that. So in that regard, there's some value in understanding the area. But to me, those are the only 2 I've ever seen. Is either you can do something about it, which you can't in the private sector, or it's to help prevent the next thing.
But let's be fair. Let's be fair on the attribution side from the private sector perspective. You don't necessarily care, to your point about who it is. It's understanding the TTPs so that you can better defend against it. So you don't necessarily need to be able to say it was APT 41, but I know that it used these 5 TTPs, and you can then probably go to MITRE, reverse engineer who it was, find other TTPs in their arsenal to better defend against it. But I would still argue that doesn't necessarily equate to requiring the knowledge of attribution to be your number one priority in that post-incident analysis phase.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't put it number one, but it does play a part. It's important to be able to understand who might attack us, right? Who reasonably can be thought of as an adversary.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to do that, we have to have some level of attribution so we can justify it, right? If I'm looking today at my company, I want to be able to say, here's the top 5, most likely problems for us, right? And then you start learning everything you can about them and their TTPs and their infrastructure and IOCs associated, et cetera. And you start preparing for those things. And then maybe you expand out as you get better and say, okay, now who's the next 5 on the list? Mm-hmm. Who's the next 5? And the only way to do that is to have some level of attribution to work from. And it might not be attribution that you had. It might be the attribution, again, that came from some industry, but you need to have them have done it so you have it available to you so that you can improve your own knowledge. So there is some value in that. And again, it's also being able to assess adversaries. This gets a little beyond what most companies are doing right now from an intel standpoint of being able to say, why would somebody be interested in us? And really sit down and say, who do we think might come after us? Because there's also the ability to start saying, who might be interested in us who hasn't come after us yet? Which is a little deeper assessment of social economic, interests and political interests. And it depends on what your company is. There's a whole lot you can go down that path, right?
Yeah.
And be able to say, well, we've never seen anything from Iran, but based on our footprint and based on our understanding of who Iran has gone after, mm-hmm. we fit that footprint. Just because we haven't been hit yet doesn't mean we shouldn't be prepared for this, because we think that we match up with the footprint of organizations that have been hit. And all of that requires attribution. Again, just because we're looking at it doesn't mean it's about us necessarily. When something happens, I still want to know who's responsible, because it feeds the entire network of knowledge for everyone else going forward too. So there's some usefulness in that, and that we're all in this together. And while I might help somebody else with this one, the next go around, somebody else might be doing attribution that helps me.
So Savantheron comes through. Great conversation. I wanted to ask about the Kasaya thing, but Neil was well prepared. Thank you. However, what do you think about the not so recent news about ransomware gangs going dark or shutting down like DarkSide?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So DarkSide was the one with Colonial Pipeline, right? So I know we touched on that a little bit. Well, first, DarkSide, they're gone for now. They'll be back. Like I don't remember any group that's actually just gone away, or any malware for that matter, or any TTP. All these things go quiet for a while and then resurface. My best guess and I don't have a great assessment on DarkSide. I've actually read some other people who did more work on this and I think had good assessments that I tend to agree with, is this was probably more than they bit off more than they could chew. This was not intended. Mm-hmm. It doesn't seem likely that DarkSide thought they were going to have this kind of an impact. Again, they very well may have shot this out to a lot of folks, and it just ended up hitting Colonial, and somebody activated the ransomware, not realizing they were doing it. I don't think these guys wanted any part of it. I think when you hit something, there are lines that haven't been written in, really there aren't good policies written. There aren't good international relationships on what is and is not off limits. But I think most people agree pipelines are probably a bad idea. Like you're certainly getting yourself into trouble when you go down that path. If you start shutting off, fuel, you start shutting off food lines, you're starting to get yourself into a dangerous situation. And to me, that just looked like something where an organization went, whoa, we went too far. They quickly came out and said, hey, this is something we don't do. We're going to shut down. Now they of course cashed out a bunch of money first. It's not like they
of course, absolutely.
Say, here's everything back, and we're really sorry.
Yeah.
They certainly took their cash on the way out the door. They'll resurface, maybe under a different name. Maybe they'll keep the same name later on. They'll probably change it, but they'll resurface. They're not gone forever. These guys, criminals, don't get up one morning and go, I really should give up this whole crime thing. I'm really feeling bad about myself. Time to turn over a new leaf. It's really
my self-esteem has really been suffering. I'm done.
I'm suffering. Yeah. I've got cyber criminal burnout.
That's right. And listen, I'm not saying that nobody who's ever committed a crime can certainly become an outstanding citizen. I don't want anybody to tell me about their uncle who had a bad start and turned it around and he's a great guy now. I'm sure that happens. I'm not saying that doesn't happen anywhere. We're talking about organized cyber criminal organizations, in this case, Russia-based, right? This is a business. This is an enterprise with very little risk usually. These guys have no motivation to get up and turn over a new leaf tomorrow. They also don't have the opportunity to suddenly start doing something else necessarily. So I'm not talking about your friend who was a shoplifter who's now a senator, which isn't all that different, I guess. But
no politics, AJ.
Hey, that was not political. That was equal opportunity right there.
That's right. I didn't pick a party for that one.
Yeah, but, exactly.
I do have to say, but I do have to say, like, I think that's important to know, right? Is that like most of these gangs, they don't say like, you're right, we're done, we messed up, we're gonna go take our money and go retire to Fiji or something like that. We saw, who was the one recently, TrickBot, and then there was another one that laid low for a little while and then came back and made a massive return as well. I mean, cash rules everything around you. I mean, they're tied to the money.
Exactly. Well,
their Ferrari repair bill was bigger than they thought.
That's right. Well, and some of them are tied to organizations that won't let them quit. We have to also understand that the actors aren't necessarily the folks in charge of all of this stuff. If you get big enough business, somebody's behind that, and whether that's traditional organized crime, mafia type folks, whether that's actually foreign governments that are leaning into you. The traditional understanding of how it works with Russia, at least, is cybercrime groups are pretty much free to do what they want as long as they don't do anything domestically, they don't cause too much blowback. And they understand that in the event that the Russian government has an interest in their services, they will provide services. That does leave you sort of indebted to the government. So you can't just get up and quit when you feel like it. Like, the government's aware of who a lot of these folks are, and can lean into them. So
you only thought you were done.
I don't think a lot of it is going away. That's right. This is. It's very much The Godfather. I thought I was out and they pulled me back in, kind of a scenario. Godfather 8 or whatever version that was.
Well, and I'm sure AJ, you remember from back in the days of the agency, right? You've got Maker's Mark, and RBN and Eleanor and Black Hat. Yeah, I figured you'd recognize that one, right? But I mean, those guys were also inter-networkally twined. That we knew that RBN didn't shut down; they just rebranded over into something else with those people who were left from that.
Yeah, the only place I can remember seeing guys who actually just went legit was Asia, Chinese. You'd see leaving the Chinese military and did some criminal work on the side, and then all of a sudden became Chinese IT company, C-suiters, and went legit. But I mean, you're going legit in a country where nobody's really in an independent company. So, their connections with the government really paid off, and that was part of it. But you did see folks that had been in the hacker community that suddenly weren't in the hacker community anymore. They had legit IT jobs. That's the only place I can remember seeing it. Doesn't mean it's the only place it's happened. I'm not an expert on everything by any means. I just remember it from that area. And that was a long time ago. Yeah. All right, you skipped the Snowden question really quickly. I saw that come up and down on the screen. I did a lot. It's funny. I did a lot of Snowden questions. I didn't actually read it. I just saw the word Snowden and rolled my eyes because I get a lot of Snowden questions. I don't know what the question was.
I actively avoid every Snowden question that I get.
He is going to get to serve out his term in Australia prison. So there you go.
Russian prison. I'll just say this: the mythology of Snowden is generally false. The guy is a traitor. I could go into great detail on it if you'd like at another time. But the mythology is false. He is not he wasn't concerned with your civil liberties or mine. He's a traitor, and that's where I'll leave that one.
Yeah. I have said similar on stream. He broke the law. That's the end of the conversation, right? That's the end of the conversation.
Yeah.
Mac Attack Hacker comes to us and says, how should the supply chain issue be resolved? Can MSPs and MSSPs be trusted to have such high infosec of high-profile clients? If so, how can clients determine if their data will be secure out of their hands?
It's a good question. Now, Mac Attack, I'm going to give you a hard time because you used the wrong there twice. And that's too many, my friend. But I'll answer it anyway. But man, you got to work on the there thing, buddy.
I gotta give real quick, just on Mac Attack. Yep. This guy is awesome. 14-year-old kid.
Well, he asks good questions. Yeah.
He's 14.
Oh hell! All right.
This guy, one of the youngest known people that I know who sits in our chat. He is so in tune with what is happening in cybersecurity space. Avid listener of the show, as well as tons of other cybersecurity stuff out there. He's going to be so awesome. He's going to be an amazing cybersecurity professional one day.
And I really didn't learn the there till I was in college anyway. So you got a few years, man.
Nah, it's okay. Listen, it's also what editors are for, right? I edit a lot of people's work. His questions are a lot smarter than the questions I'd be asking. So somebody else can remember which there fits in. It's fine. It's a good question. It's one I don't have a good answer for. That's how good the question is. How should it be resolved? Man, I don't know right now, to be truthful. As far as whether you can trust MSPs or MSSPs, that's been a back and forth question for a long time. That's why you see CISOs that have been having, it's one of a number of reasons why CISOs have different opinions, right? Many companies, a CISO comes in and he goes, you know what? I want it all managed services. I don't want the overhead. I don't want the hassle. I don't want the stress. Push it all out there. I'm going to accept the risk of my data being someplace else. I just want it off my plate. And then the next guy or gal comes in and goes, nope, I hate that idea. I want to control everything. I want to own everything. Bring it all inside. Let's build a new SOC. That's been a tug of war. It's gone back and forth as long as I've been in the industry, and I'm sure quite a bit longer.
And it's not changing.
This is going to add a new layer to it. Right. And it's not going to change, right? This is going to add a new layer to it, though. I do think it'll change the risk assessment, right? And now there's another look at, well, how much do we trust them and why? But what'll probably come out of it is a whole nother round of different boxes to check to show how secure you are. Every MSSP and MSP has to have a whole slew of past performance that they can show somebody, and a whole slew of boxes they check to say, well, we've been third-party examined for all these different things, and we have all this security and all these controls, and then it's enough that somebody says, okay, we believe you, and we're going to hand you all our data and all the stuff that goes with it, and then we see what bad things happen. So ultimately, and Mac Attack wouldn't know this yet, he's not in the industry yet, it's contractual discussion that really comes down between the MSSP and the customer. So ultimately, they're accepting that risk before this starts. This may change how they calculate the risk, but I don't think it'll change the business all that much. There'll just be more boxes they'll have to check and more hoops they'll have to jump through. Maybe a handful more of CISOs who really wanted to bring it in-house and go and get budget will now be able to use this to leverage, hey, we should keep it in-house. There's more risk here than we want to take on. So I think we may see some of that. But if I'm going to be really honest, 6 months from now, if this quiets down, if we don't see a slew of these, nothing will change.
But let's be honest.
I think it's going to be in a contract, though. It's going to be a separate section in every terms and condition. You don't think so, Neil? Absolutely. I think it's going to be.
I just railed on Jerry Auger on my stream on Saturday over third-party risk. Like, go look at the YouTube I just put up today, because I think third-party risk, and I say this knowing how many GRC people we have here. I've worked a ton with GRC folks, massive respect for the GRC industry. I think contractual requirements in a risk conversation are nothing more than fluff BS. There's nothing actionable about them at all.
So Mac Attack Hacker, you've got 3 people on the stream, and all of us disagree with each other. So great question.
Well, and that sounded a good question, right? Listen, I don't completely disagree with Neil. I actually agree with both of you. I think the contracts will show more stuff, and I think it'll still be fluff. I think it won't be enforceable.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the risk is something. I used to work for an MSSP. I worked for Symantec. And among other things, we were an MSSP company. And you have that discussion about the risk, but ultimately, we have an agreement on who owns risk on what. There's a whole lot of contractual stuff that keeps everybody safe from getting sued by everybody else. And there'll just be lawyers making a few more bucks to rewrite these contracts a little more complicated. And when it's all said and done, when a bad thing happens, it's going to be a lot of he's responsible.
That's right.
And nothing will change.
That's right.
This is the cost benefit analysis when you do MSSP versus SOC, right? The company's going to say, well, we lost this data, we have to deal with it, but look how much money we saved in overhead over the last 5, 6, 8 years of not having a SOC of our own, and all the money we put into that. This is why we pay an MSSP.
That's what I was going to bring up right there is MSSPs are an acceptable evil in our industry, right? If you are under $1 to $5 billion revenue as a company, you probably cannot afford to have your own internal security operations team. You have to have an MSSP.
Yep, I agree.
As long as
and you're right, necessary evil is right. I mean, you hit it on the head. People accept this risk. They have to. Like you said, you can't really afford to build a quality SOC that can do what you need to be done. So this is the trade-off. It's not all different than healthcare, right? You and I would love, I'm sure, to pay, to have our own doctor and our own medical care and be in control of all of that. But the truth is, almost everybody's in a group healthcare program because none of us can afford that. Billionaires don't have HMOs. Yeah. Right? They have private doctors and they take care of everything just for billionaires. They don't have HMOs. They don't have to get referrals to go find the next doctor and specialist. They just get things done. Most companies aren't the billionaires. Most companies are you and I, and
that's right.
It's the same concept. So yeah, MSSP is like an HMO basically. If that's an analogy that works.
Yeah, no, that's a good one right there. Savantharan comes through and says, also, do you think ransomware gangs got scared by the politics finally paying attention to the situation, or are the gangs just going to adopt and keep going as easy targets are attempting just like an ATM full of money?
I think both of those are true. I think there was certainly fear, specifically dark side, right? I think there was fear with that. But the money is too tempting. And the reality is, until something really bad happens to a ransomware gang, And even then, maybe it won't matter, right? We've seen gangs get rolled up, not ransomware gangs. We've seen ATM, smash gangs get rolled up, but it didn't stop people from doing that. Another nice thing about being in the criminal world is you have to have some belief that you're better than the other criminals and you're not going to get caught. I mean, there's some arrogance to being a criminal as your career field. Some of it's by choice, right? Because of the economy and where you live, et cetera. But some of it's also, there's some boldness to it or some arrogance to it that you're not going to get caught. And if somebody else does, you go, well, I'm better than that guy. That's why he got caught and we won't. But the money is just far too tempting. I think most people with very limited technical skills could go into this business. I joked about it years ago. If you want to go industry, all you need to do is open up your own Bitcoin wallet, grab a hold of some readily available ransomware, and get out there. You don't even have to get the ransomware.
Oh, real quick. AJ is not advocating for all of you out there who are trying to get into the industry to go be ransomware gang members.
That's right. Okay. Mac attack. This is not the way to get into the industry. This is not what I'm suggesting. Right? Don't go home. Don't do this and then blame the dummy on the internet. Right? But I used to joke about it when I was at Symantec. There's a common concept that's cyber extortion, which is when you send the email to somebody saying, hey, we're going to hit you with this massive DDoS attack if you don't pay this number of dollars by Y date or Bitcoin, right? Yeah. And we're, to show we're serious, we're hitting you now. And there's some low-level attack you hadn't even noticed until they mentioned it. That works. Like, that gets money paid without even having to do anything. And the letter itself is available on GitHub. You can download it right now. The same letter everybody's been using for years. Just change your name into it, whatever scary group name you want to come up with, Dirty Panda, whatever. And throw a Bitcoin wallet in there. And I promise, if you send out 1 million spams, you're going to make money on that. It's a business that would certainly pay for itself. I don't recommend it. Again, it's illegal and it's not a good idea. But that's how ubiquitous this is and how much people will just pay. Not to deal with the issue. Oh, it cost me 5 Bitcoin? Well, that's a lot now. It used to be nothing. It cost me a Bitcoin? Yeah, I'll pay the Bitcoin just not to have to deal with the possibility that maybe they're serious. All right, just give them the Bitcoin.
But on that same note, though, because I do think that when we talk about ransomware gangs paying attention to politics, I do think that there's always that flip side of that conversation, which is like, just because the ransomware gangs found it now, China and Russia have always known that these vulnerabilities exist in companies like Colonial Pipeline and, the Northeast Power Grid and things like that. And so if anything, those organizations probably are a little bit ticked right now that, the light has been shined on potentially something that could have been used in a future.
They lost their avenue in.
That's right. They lost their avenue in.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, when things like this happen, it certainly burns opportunities for others later on, and that's nation states, right? So, China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, these aren't things that they necessarily want to have happen. This is all part of international war planning at some point.
That's right.
And we do the same thing. Listen, every country does.
That's right.
Whether it's kinetic warfare or whether you're talking about cyber warfare, we all have lists of targets and what we think we're doing against, X target. And you have all these, possible courses of action, from the really benign to the very, horrible. And this burned some of those. I have no doubt the pipeline one. There's nation states that went back and went, well, all right, we got to take that off the target list, or we got to, this tactic won't work anymore. They're going to fix it, or at least they'll follow up and see. Now it's also possible they'll look later and go, yeah, these guys didn't really fix the problem. We can still do it again later, I guess. We'll keep it on the list. And that's another area where some of these organizations have to be careful that they don't upset their host nation. Right?
That's right.
The patrons, can turn against them if they're not careful.
Yeah.
What's Mac?
Mac Attack coming back. Mac Attack's crushing it. He's the new Fasochi actual. Do you think that the lack of publicity regarding attacks like Kasaya is part of the problem? If consumers, corporations don't know their data is on the dark web stores, then how will they know to not send their data through X provider until it's resolved? The quintessential the consumerism question. And again, it's
a good one.
But again, we harp on it all the time. Like have you stopped shopping at Target? Have you stopped using LinkedIn?
Well,
have you stopped using Microsoft?
I'll tell you what though, Target did spend a whole lot of money on building a really good Intel team after they got whacked. I happen to know those guys. They're really good.
And now they're trying to subcontract that entire SOC out because they can no longer afford it in their security team.
Sure. But I mean, at least they took it seriously, right? I mean, to answer, Mac Attack, I mean, I think the issue, it's a good question. Publicity is an interesting question because on the one hand, there's so much out there that I think most of the public is just becoming numb to it all. every day there's another compromise. I mean, I remember when 1 million accounts being compromised was a big deal. Now you find 500, 600, 800 million accounts. People just shrug. They don't even pay attention to it. So I know there's a whole lot of numbness, but the other issue is we still, as a populace, most people don't understand any of this, or very, very little of it. So I don't, to be honest, there's a fundamental education issue that isn't going to be fixed by us going out doing a better job explaining to people, hey, this compromise resulted in this data going in these places. And I think you make an interesting point when you talk about things going to the dark web, and we could probably do a better job of helping the general populace understand the results of a compromise. When these things happen, this is what a FULS, folder looks like. This is what your data actually looks like on the market. This is what it sells for, and this is where it goes. But again, because it became so big, I don't think they would personalize it necessarily. If you told me that, my personal data was out on the internet, which it probably is, but I know it is. It was on the dark web in a bin with, 1 million other users, and, my FULS is worth $1.50 right now in the market. What am I going to do about it? It's already gone. I can't do anything. And again, I feel insulated because if you steal my personal information, chances are you can open a credit card, and, I'm not going to worry too much about it. I'll on my credit report. I'll report it as fraud, and it'll get dumped because the bank eats that because they eat billions anyway. If you steal my identity, that's probably my biggest job of managing some of that as well. But ultimately, I can't do anything about it. I think it's a great question, Mac Tech, but I almost think the ship has sailed on that one at this point. Everybody knows this happens all the time. It doesn't make the front page of the news because nobody cares. Is the reality. I don't know how we fix it as a result. We talked about it. If the market doesn't change, if people don't move their business, you don't affect the board, you don't affect profits, nobody makes changes on security, and yet at the same time, people don't care anymore. They've tuned most of this stuff out. And I also think
we talked about that. We talked about that
things going on
before. Yeah, the reality is until it hits the consumer and it makes their life more painful. Like right now, it doesn't make your life painful at all. If you said, okay, well, it's your third time you've been attacked, and the reality is you own some culpability, so we're charging you half of this. That would get people's attention super fast.
Maybe, but I don't know how that would play out. So, for instance, I'll use mine as an example. My credit card was compromised. I mentioned that, right? Nobody knows where my credit card was compromised, though. My bank certainly asked me more questions this time than I've had them ask in the past. They would have wanted to understand, which I was surprised by. But ultimately, there was no way to hold me accountable. I said, I don't know. Was it a card skimmer? Well, maybe. I can't tell you for sure if it was. My guess is it's probably tied to an Amazon hack, if you want to guess. I don't know, though. The problem is my credit card is tied to so many organizations, right? Whether it's Amazon, whether it's PayPal, whether it's all these other places my credit card's tied to. My credit card wasn't stolen from me. Nobody took my credit card and used it. Nobody made a copy of it. It was very unlikely a skimmer based on how it was used and where it was used. But if it was taken from a third party, I don't know which third party it was. Maybe I'm going to find out in 6 months from now that a retailer was compromised 8 months ago and I didn't know about it. And that's where my card was compromised.
Right.
So how are you going to hold me accountable for that? My bank doesn't want to do that because I run a ton of money, more than I care to admit, through that credit card. They don't want to lose my business over it. If they decide to charge me for half of that fraud, I just shut that card down that day and move someplace else. That $500 they got from me probably wasn't worth the money they lost in business. So they're not going to go that path, I wouldn't think. Maybe with smaller customers, they might. I can see them do that, which is unfortunate. We'll end up in an industry where credit will really be tied to how much you spend and how much you make, and it'll become more of an elite thing, I think.
Yeah. Well, don't you think we're already headed there?
To a point. We always have been, right? To a point. I mean, credit is still kind of an elite business. It's hard to start and hard to build credit, and banks don't care about you unless you spend a ton of money, pretty much. Like, if you don't spend much, they'll shut you down. My bank threatened to shut my bank account down. I have a savings account that's been sitting forever, and I didn't realize they were going to shut off my savings account because I didn't use it enough. What do they care? It's free money for them. It's just sitting in an account. But they're like, yeah, you're not active for.
I'm not doing anything with it.
Yeah, I literally had to go in and take money out of my account to show activity, so they wouldn't close my account. It made no real sense to me.
You're like, are you happy now?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, all right, great. I took $5 out. Congratulations. I ended up closing the account, as it turns out, because I'm moving. But I mean, credit's always a little bit of an elite business, right? You work hard, and for anybody who doesn't know this, you can rig the system pretty easily too. Like, credit's a weird system in which you open up more credit that you don't use, and you somehow get a better rating.
Yeah, exactly. On that note, real quick before I get to this one for BSEC, though, we talk about like the everybody being tone deaf, in the industry. Mm-hmm. I think the problem that we run into, kind of the catch-22 on that, is that if we stop talking about it, then we stop shining a light on it. But at the same time, we do know that the more we talk about it, the more people get tone deaf about it. But yet we're scared to not talk about it because then it's like, well, if we don't talk about it, it must not be important, right?
Yeah, we've got to find a way to cut through it, right? I think, and I don't have a good answer for this. I mean, I'm spitballing along with you on this one. There's got to be a way to have something that's said that matters. Just saying, hey, a breach happened and it was X number of accounts just doesn't mean anything to anybody. It used to be 1 million accounts, now it's 400 million, not 600. All we ever say is, oh, the largest breach in history happened, 800 million accounts, Yahoo. And then on to sports, and nobody says anything more about it.
That's right.
And somebody with a Yahoo account goes, all right, I guess I got to change my password, and that's it. They don't understand any possible impact. It doesn't matter to them. It just moved on to the next thing, and they don't pay attention to it. So the messaging certainly should change, and then we've got to add the impact and say, why does this matter? We've got to be able to have those stories, but we don't, and the news doesn't cover it that way because they don't know either.
They don't know.
The newscaster who reports the LinkedIn compromise, he's reading the copy somebody gave him. And the guy who gave him the copy doesn't understand the technology any better than he does.
I've been on the back side of that because I've done a lot of news appearances in the last 6 months. That's been one of my goals is to be in more news type of. I know, but I can tell you that like it's insane. A, how little they know, and B, how little they care. They truly only care about putting that story on the air for their own ratings. They really they don't care what the person takes out of it who's heard their story whatsoever.
Yeah, well, and the sad part is, and I don't want to denigrate these folks too much, but the truth is, you're host of the news right now. We're not talking about a tech show or something like that. We're just talking about the nightly news, right? Whatever the headline is, or the afternoon rush hour news, or whatever the hell you got going on.
Yeah.
That person's job is just to read the news. Like that, their job isn't to understand it or anything. They are a messenger. They're paid because they have a great voice, or because they have a good look to them, or because they're personable. They get you what you need, and they're trustworthy, or they look trustworthy, they sound trustworthy, they know how to read well, and they're paid to be a performer to do that thing. It's not a bad thing. They don't have to care. The investigative reporter is supposed to care. The journalist is supposed to care. The person who's the host of the news program isn't a journalist. Traditionally, they're just reading the news. That's their gig, right? So yeah, they don't know. I've been on a couple of shows, not nearly as many as you, but radio shows, things like that. And generally, that's it. You get on, you get your 30 seconds or your minute. You got your little blurb, and they tee you up, and you say your thing, and they ask you 3 canned questions. You give them 3 canned answers, and they go, "Okay, great, thanks very much." And then move on to the next segment, and they never think about it. It's the next thing that they were on their list of things they're supposed to message to other people. And that isn't a bad thing. That's their job. It's no different than somebody who goes out and sings a song or, is acting or something like that. It's a performance art. The problem is when we have journalists that don't care. People who are supposed to know the industry, who are supposed to understand this. Somebody says they're doing an expose and they spend 30 minutes, talking to an expert in the field about this, and they anything about it or care, that's a problem for me.
Yeah.
If you're really going to take the time to sit down with, like, say, a Chris Krebs, I'll use him as an example. Know your stuff. Like, come in, actually care about the industry, actually do some research, ask hard questions, understand the impact of the answers you're going to get. Don't take the person who was sitting at the desk last week reading the news and have that person get the interview. They don't know anything about it, and they don't have to. It's not their job. Pick somebody who does and let them do the research and do real interviews and pass along real information.
That is something I think we suffer from in our industry. We do not have any good cyber investigative journalists. I know everybody runs to Brian Krebs and whatnot, but I think that we definitely struggle with that level of journalistic talent in our industry.
Yeah, it's been hard. And listen, the industry is still dominated mostly by introverts.
Kind of a spawned question again from your line of reasoning here. You've got a couple of statements that why should I care? Why should I care? Why should the consumer care? From your perspective, you get a breach that connected names and email addresses. Can you give the audience maybe just a little bit of let me paint the picture for you, because that's a tip of the iceberg kind of information, but it's now correlated. You've got one more correlation point against your name and your email address. Can you maybe give a little bit of a framework for what that actually means? Like, we have to tell the story, right? A better, what if, XYZ happens, this gets popped, we now have this information out. What's the so what that we could maybe do a better job of painting that picture?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
You froze for a minute.
For a minute, we froze up here.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yep.
So to answer the question, though, right? So we're talking about usernames and email addresses first. You know, I think when you talk about something like that, some of that's just about anonymity, right? So if an account's been compromised, a lot of times people have accounts that are set up and they're using an email address, but they're not trying to attach that to who they actually are, right? It can be Twitter's a good example. You have a Twitter handle, but somewhere in the back you've got your email address. But that doesn't mean you're telling people who you are. If the breach happens and I now can tie usernames and human names to those email accounts, I can now go back and say, guy is actually responsible for this Twitter account. And what he said in his Twitter account, well, here's a whole bunch of stuff he for the world to know is really tied to him. There's a reason he's using an anonymous account. And now I can that to to leverage that person and say, hey, listen, you said a whole bunch of, I'm going to use the worst in this case, a whole bunch of racist stuff or a whole bunch of sexist stuff. And it turns out you're the CEO from a company. I bet you don't want this to go public. You're not saying this on your LinkedIn account. You're not saying this publicly. Do you want to lose your job? Do you want your family to know about this? Those are the kind of things that can be used to compromise. The other piece is the step further is, again, as you mentioned, it's a piece of a puzzle. If I want to build an entire profile of somebody, I've now got a username, I've got their personal name, email. I'm going to start looking at other networks. That email has probably been used in other places. If you're the dope who used your personal email for Twitter, there's a good chance you used it everywhere else. Maybe I'm going to find out that you've got it on a dating site that you don't want people to know about because, you're married, you got 3 kids, and you live in the suburbs. Or maybe you've got it in a white supremacist site that nobody knows about. It turns out you're an underground white supremacist. That's a bit of a problem. While I personally would, be nauseated by that, the criminal may not even care about what your politics are. All they know is it's a good chance you don't want the world to know that you're a white supremacist. So it's something they could use against you. Maybe your sexual orientation isn't what you're saying publicly, and that's something you're worried about and afraid about, right? Adversaries are going to get as much information as they can on you and use it. If you're somebody they think they can leverage. Now, listen, if you're Joe Schmo and you're an average guy like us and you just work a job, they may not care as much. The truth of the matter is, if tomorrow
Neil's on the news a bunch, he's not just an average guy.
Yeah, Neil's important.
Oh my God!
I mean, he's the guy you want to ransom.
Oh, I know. That's kind of what I was thinking.
You don't want to ransom me. You want to ransom Neil.
Oh my God!
But if tomorrow you found my
that was officially, I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun Neil.
That's
exactly what that one was right there.
That's exactly right. But I mean, if you found my dirty secret and put it on the internet, what's it really going to do?
I'm going to send both of you emails with whatever they send to me.
That's fine. I'm looking forward to it. I'll just use it against you later, I'm sure. But I mean, if you do it to me, you're not going to get anything. I'm going to be embarrassed. I'm going to move on probably. I doubt I'm going to pay anybody off. I don't think I have a dirty enough secret to ruin my life that I care enough about.
Right.
But some people do. A lot of people do.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where those breaches matter. There's also, again, if I just got your username and password, if I got your username and password, or your email and password in this case, right? The other piece to that is reusing. Very few people have accounts everywhere with always different passwords and always different email accounts or always different usernames. I might compromise your Yahoo account. Maybe you haven't used Yahoo in 10 years, or AOL, which you haven't used in at least 10 years, I hope. And I get your username and password, but there's a pretty good chance I'm now going to run that same username and password through every bank that I can think of, and through every cell company, all these other companies. There's a very good chance you use same materials. Now, if it's 10 years old, hopefully you've changed your password in other places. But people reuse things a lot and don't realize it. So I have that discussion with my family all the time. When they say, there's a my email is compromised. I say, well, all right, or my Snapchat or whatever. All right, well, change your password. And by the way, change your password everywhere else that you've used that one to something else. And none of them should match. Get a password manager finally. Stop using your daughter's birthday as your password everywhere. It's not that hard to figure out. That's my sister specifically. So that's where a lot of these things end up coming together, right? Is the little bits and pieces. And that's a piece of education people don't get that seems simple, and we probably could do a better job of messaging. My family knows now. They understand password reuse is just a really bad idea. Listen, they probably all still do it because they don't care what I say. But at least they're educated now, and when they get
they just know that we're all paranoid people.
That's right.
That's what my family knows. Oh, Jeff's the paranoid one.
If somebody hits your email, I'm not worried about your email. I get it. You're going to change your email. I'm telling you, what are the other things you've used that password on? Because if that email and that password are associated, that's also my banking. You should be changing that immediately because that's the next stop. They're gonna use your email. listen, if I compromise your email, I'm going to go through and find out here's all the places you do business, because your email is going to tell me. It's going to show me all your banking and all your real estate and all your everything, all your mortgage, whatever. And I'm going to take that information and I'm going to run to all those places before you know, and I'm going to use the same credentials and see how many of them work. And I bet a lot of them do.
So we're coming up.
Would you recommend people use a different email for their banking, for all their financial stuff?
That's a good question. I don't. I have several email accounts. I tend to use the same email account for most everything, but I do use a different password for everything.
Yeah.
I've got a password manager, and I'm running 12 to 20 character passwords, and I'm running multi-factor authentication everywhere it's authorized. Two-factor authentication, I'm a huge believer in, and not the two-factor authentication that sends you a text, although that's better than nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Get a password manager, use an actual multi-factor authenticator, Google Authenticator, or LastPass has one that goes with their password manager, something like that. I use the same email for most everything though, but that's not an issue as long as I'm changing the passwords everywhere. And none of those match the password for my email account itself. If you compromise my email account, each email account, you're just going to get that account. That doesn't match anything else in my world. So if you want to hack my email account, go for it, but it won't match anything else.
Yeah. Real quick, we are coming to the top of the hour. I did want to get one more topic in before we closed out for tonight. And this is obviously a encore presentation of the conversation that you and I had a year ago. You actually went out this time and wrote a blog article about the rise of the chief intelligence officer. I'm going to drop this in chat so that everybody can go read your blog on that as well. Now,
sweet.
You and I had some disagreements over whether I thought this was a valid, a seat at the table. I think that there's still a lot of, we talk about the problems that exist at the C level with CIOs and CISOs and CEOs and things like that. We've talked ad nauseum about that on the show. Do you think, and I encourage everybody else to go out there and read your blog article as well about this. Do you think that this position is viable? Do you think it's scalable? Do you see it as having a justifiable ROI? And can you talk a little bit about the rise of the chief intelligence officer?
Yeah, man. Yeah, I mean, I assume now that we talked about this a while ago, and I've written this, article that's gotten so much reviews. I assume you've changed your mind and come all the way around to my side on this.
Yeah,
but,
about that.
That happens a lot with Neil, by the way. You just keep pestering him until he changes his mind.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sure Neil's very easily swayed and immediately like, wow, this guy's right. But so here's the
5 years in, it's not working.
Yeah, here's the crux of it. Anybody, like I said, read the article. It's on the company blog. It was also on U.S. Cybersecurity Magazine first. And for some reason, you can't access it. If any of those things are a problem, I'll get you a copy of it too. But because I actually had an org chart and I talked about this a little bit. I went a little more detail than our first discussion. Do I think it's a viable position? Yes, of course. That's why I wrote the article. ROI is an interesting discussion to have. I think so. What I did, and there's an org chart that I think did a pretty good job of expressing what I thought the board needed to look like. Is I think you have operational level people, e-staffers, people who are actually involved in operations at the e-staff, and you have what I would consider to be consultative. And I think that's where the intelligence officer sits. I put them in the same side as your chief legal. These are the consigliaries for the CEO, essentially. These are folks that are providing you professional guidance. What's the ROI on your chief legal officer? Has anybody ever sat down and figured out what the value is that you're paying to have that person? I don't know that they have, but I think everybody understands you don't really want to have a contract go bad on you. You don't want to deal with a lot of legal consequences of not having it. I think that's the same scenario here. What I was able to at least begin to lay out was we have a lot of organizations that have intel in a lot of different places, right? They have it sort of spread out. And in some cases, there's redundancies and there's bad results. We also have organizations who take intel and they just bury it in the SOC. It's just under, director of cyber, defensive cyber operations.
Right.
And, I've said before, I think that's like taking NSA and putting it under CENTCOM. If anybody doesn't understand the government, CENTCOM only works about the Middle East. So if NSA was under CENTCOM, all they would ever give you is Middle Eastern intel. They wouldn't worry about Russia or China or anything else. It'd be kind of a waste of resources. And what I've said is the more you raise up intel, the better your picture is going to be. And it really doesn't cost you much more money, if any. And the E-staff, the C-level, you can actually bring in things like business intelligence and some other metrics to go with that. And how do these all tie together? How do we use intel, not just as cyber intelligence, not just as CTI, but to take a look at, hey, if we're going to acquire a company, we talk about M&A right now. Mostly M&A is about, does the company our portfolio? Do they have good margins? Where's it going to? Does it fit what we're trying to accomplish? Does it make our business better? Do we think we're going to get return on investment by buying this company? But a lot of companies don't take into account what risks are we taking on with this company. Have they been compromised before? Where are their third-party assets? What contractors are they hiring? Where are they geographically located? A lot of intel questions that should be asked. Companies buy these other companies and then realize there's tons of problems they didn't consider, and that's tons of overhead costs. And then they just go, well, CISO, you figure it out. Or physical security, you guys sort this problem out. HR, you figure this stuff out. And all that stuff is just added cost that could be avoided if they did the intel work first, which should come from somebody who's got an intel background. And maybe it changes the negotiation on what you pay for that, that acquisition, or whether you do it at all. Maybe the risk factor changes. You go, hey, this is a great acquisition. We were between two companies, and because we did the intel work, we're better off hiring this company or buying this company because the risks are lower. The onboarding costs will be lower. The integration is going to be lower, and they also still fit into our portfolio, and they're going to do good things. So there's a lot of other bits there that intel gets into. But ultimately, and by the way, that could certainly play into the metrics as their value here. I think you'd be able to show some of that when you tie the business intel into it. But I'm still worried more about the threat intelligence, and how it's space. And ROI is still a really tough piece on that until something bad happens. Still need to do a better job of putting metrics in place that say we prevented something, and it's hard sometimes to do that because did we prevent it? Because it didn't happen doesn't mean it was going to happen. But you've got to be able to kind of figure out where that fits. And I've always had a challenge with the ROI piece with security and with intelligence. I always end up sort of tying it back to banking in that, if I owned a bank and I've got cameras and I've got security guards and I've got all this money and banks spend millions of dollars on security. And most banks don't get robbed. Like for years and the hope is you never get robbed. I don't remember an accountant ever coming in and going, man, you don't need all these guards. You don't need all these cameras. You don't need all this security. Why the hell are you wasting all this money? Like, there's no ROI on this. We have no proof that you would have been robbed if you didn't have any of this.
Right.
But everybody knows you would have been. It's the cost of doing business if you own money, if you have banking, right? I think there's some of that thing to be figured in. We do have to find a better way of handling metrics for preventative measures, which is what intelligence does. That's a huge challenge and one that I'm working a little bit, not successfully, and I'm sure I told you this last year. I told you how well I've done. But I'm still trying to work with some folks to integrate intel better into the discussion.
Yeah.
Because the language of the board continues to be risk and profit.
Yeah.
Lower my risk, raise my profits. That's all they really care about. And if you can tie intel better into the risk discussion and say, we are lowering our risks as a result of this in some sort of measurable fashion that they believe that you can justify and defend, I think that's where you get more of the ROI. Right now, the simple solution, if I walked into most companies, large enterprise companies, I probably could make an argument for why you'd be better off to unify your intel just by taking a look at where you're spending it all right now. And what you're getting out of it. Just saying, hey, listen, if you took all these other little organizations and made it one up here and served everybody here as a service model, you'd probably save money right away just doing that.
Yeah. All right. That we are at the top of the hour. That does do it for us today. Listen, everybody hang around. We are going to do a raid on another cybersecurity channel. So don't anybody go anywhere. AJ, on behalf of myself, on behalf of my co-host Jeff, on behalf of my entire community, thank you so much for your 1-year inaugural revisit to the cyber and security stream. It was a pleasure as always to have you. The floor is yours, sir. If you'd like to plug Anomali or any of the works that you've got going on, and say goodbye to the community today.
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me, and I'm happy to come back. Whenever you need me, I'm happy to come on. I'm not going to do plugging too much. I do work for Anomali. The company does some pretty good work. If anybody works in the cyber industry, cybersecurity, cyber intelligence specifically, we're a platform company, cyber threat intelligence platform. We have a really cool platform called Match that takes what's going on in the external world, ties it to your internal environment, your SIM specifically, and can give you better context to give you better prioritization of your alerts, which is a very cool thing. Also, the retrospective is really important with that. So when you're doing when you have been compromised, which happens to everybody, the ability to look back, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, very quickly and find patient zero, something you can't do with most SIMs. Really cool technology. I highly recommend it. The third piece we have is something called Anomaly Lens. There's a free version of that.
I was going to say, you guys are still doing the free version stuff, right?
Yeah. Lens is very, very cool. You can go to like the Chrome store. I think it's on Edge. I was using Edge. Not so bad. You can go download that right now for free. Very cool tool. It scans anything on your screen as you're reading it, and will tie it back to context. It says, oh hey, this CVE, this is what the CVE is, to give some background. It's very cool stuff. It's totally free. You can set it up so it doesn't auto scan, so it does it only when you want it to. It doesn't retain any data. We're not stealing anything from everybody. So pretty cool. There's also a paid version if you want more information on that. But as far as me personally, like I said, I'm moving to Minnesota. So if you're area and you're looking to have lunch with me, you won't be able to after tomorrow. If you're in Minnesota, I'd be happy to catch up with anybody. I'll hopefully come back and visit. I'll still be doing the same stuff. I've got an article in Security Week coming up pretty soon. I've got to write another U.S. Cybersecurity Magazine pretty soon. And other podcasts and whatnot. I'm out there and I'm around. But if anybody's looking for help or something you think I can do, don't hesitate to hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm all about connecting with people or connecting people with other people that are better than me. So yeah, if there's anything I can do for anybody, just on LinkedIn, I'm super easy to find, and I'm happy to chat to anybody.
Thank you so much, AJ. And for those who are looking for AJ's LinkedIn, hit that ! guest in chat, and you can get AJ's LinkedIn. AJ, I'm going to send you along your way. Jeff and I are going to close off. For up-to-the-minute cybersecurity news, make sure you follow and subscribe to the Cyber and Security channel on Twitch and YouTube. Also, make sure you turn on those notifications so that you know when we go live.